Okay, so next proof here, so we have a pair of parallel lines given to us, B, C, and D, E. If I hover, there they are. And we're given that angle ABC, this corner angle, and AED, this angle, are complementary. So those two angles are complementary. We want to prove that ABC and ACB are complementary. Well, let's take a look at where those two angles are, right? So where is ABC? So ABC is this angle here. It's acute, right? And AED, I'm sorry, and ACB is this angle here. So it's very similar. This angle up here, it's also acute. But again, they have to add up to 90, so they both have to be acute. So the question is, how are we going to connect these two? Well, they already have those two angles connected, right? Well, if the lines are parallel, can we see if angle AED is maybe congruent to angle ACB? Let me get rid of this stuff. Right, what do you think? Do you think we can show that this angle here is congruent to that angle? Because if this angle, I'll call this 1, and this angle are complementary, and if these two angles are congruent, then aren't these also complementary, right? So say that this angle B here is, let's just say 30 degrees. Then what would angle E have to be? 60. Well, if this angle at E and C are congruent, then what does the angle at C have to be? Also 60, which means they're complementary. So here's the idea. Can we say that those two angles, the angle at E and the angle at C, are congruent? And I believe we can because we have parallel lines. Parallel lines cut by my transversal. They are both in corresponding positions. These are corresponding angles. They're going to be congruent. So that's the first thing. We're going to say that those two angles are congruent. And then we can say that if we have uh, congruent angles here, we can then substitute. We can take out angle AED here and replace it with angle ACB, and that would be the final answer. So it's only a two-step proof. All right, so let's take a look here. So because these lines are parallel, I think we have more congruent angles. I think that angle AED, so this angle here, is congruent to angle ACB. And that's because these lines are parallel and we have congruent corresponding angles. Parallel lines form congruent corresponding angles. So now these two are congruent. And again, if AED is complementary to angle B, then ACB is also going to be complementary to B because these are congruent. We can just substitute one for the other. So we're done. Angle ABC and angle ACB are complementary. So again, what I'm doing is I'm taking this statement right here, I'm bringing it down there, but I'm taking out AED, and since AED and ACB are congruent, I'm substituting ACB in place. That's what I'm doing. So this is going to be a substitution. And I'm done. Green check mark. I showed that they're congruent and they're then substitutable. So we're good. Boom. Okay, one more proof coming. Okay, last proof here. So now we have this upside down T. If you remember from section 1.6, that upside down T means perpendicular. Perpendicular. When you hear the word perpendicular, you better think of right angles, right? Notice here, we got right angle boxes. All right, so we have some right angles going on here. We want to prove that angle BEA. Where's BEA? BEA and FDG. And FDG are congruent. Well, we kind of did a proof like this before. So I think that I have a third angle involved that I need to worry about right here, right? This angle. This angle and angle FDG will be congruent. So they'll be congruent. And if I can show that these two lines are parallel, then these two angles, the angle BEA and the angle CDE, will also be congruent. So we'll have all three angles congruent, and we can use transitive property to talk about them all. But the question is, how do we prove those two lines congruent or those two lines parallel? We'll look over here. Right angle, right angle. Those are going to be congruent angles, right? And you have this parallel line, this parallel line. Here's your transversal. These two angles are in corresponding position. Those right angles are corresponding angles. So because they're right angles, they're going to be congruent. And then we can say that the lines are parallel because we have corresponding angles congruent. And then we can talk about this pair of corresponding angles and then this pair of vertical angles, and we're done. So that's the proof. Let's get to it. All right, so the first thing I have to say is I have to say that these two angles are right angles. So I have a right angle. I'm going to name this one AC and BE. AC and BE. So I'll name this one first ABE. And that's because you have perpendicular lines. I'll do the same thing with this angle up here. I'm going to call it angle ACD. You could just call it angle C if you wanted to. Not congruent, sorry. Right angles. No. I'm losing my mind. Trying to go too fast. This angle right here, ACD. And now, if those two angles are both right angles, then they both measure 90 and they're going to be congruent. So now we can say that they're congruent. Angle ABE and angle ACD are congruent. And this, we talked very briefly about this way back in, I think it was section 1.5, but all right angles are congruent. So now that these two angles are congruent, now we can say that the lines BE and CD are parallel. BE, CD. And they are parallel because those right angles are corresponding angles and we've shown them to be congruent. Nice. And now that you have parallel lines, now this other pair of corresponding angles will be congruent. One angle that we want, BEA, and then this kind of middleman angle, CDA. So BEA and CDA. So we'll say angle BEA, and that's one of the angles I want to prove, right? Congruent, is congruent to angle, and I'll call this CDA. You could say CDE if you wanted to, but I'll say CDA. They're both the same because they're on the same side. And this is, again, because the lines are parallel, you have corresponding angles that are congruent. So it's this idea of converse thinking and then conditional thinking, right? So we use the converse to prove the lines are parallel, and we use the conditional to say that these two angles are congruent. Okay, and now I need to link this angle CDA with its vertical angle FDG, because FDG is the other angle I want to prove congruent. So angle CDA, the same angle here, is going to be congruent to angle FDG, the other angle I want to prove congruent, and that's because they are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. And now we've set ourselves up for the transitive property, right? If you look at these two statements, you have BEA and FDG both congruent to CDA, so we cancel them out, and there's the two angles I want to prove congruent. Congruent angles, BEA congruent to FDG. That is by the transitive property. Green check mark, and we're good to go. So that one is very tough because I wanted to incorporate perpendicular lines because we haven't yet. So best of luck on that one. These are your proofs. Now you'll notice that your assignment is 6 proofs long. So I wonder what they're going to look like if there's 6 proofs long. And we just got done with 6 proofs. So do your best to try to think about them yourself. And we're developing your reasoning skills. Ask for help if you need it. This is weird stuff, especially if it's your first time. I get it. Best of luck.